You tell yourself you have high standards. You're the person who triple checks everything, who can't submit work until it's perfect, who holds yourself to a level most people would call impressive. And from the outside, it looks like excellence. People admire your discipline, your attention to detail, your refusal to settle. But here's a question that might unsettle you. What if those high standards aren't about excellence at all? What if they're a cage you built to protect yourself from a fear you've never fully looked at? Because for a lot of people, what they call high standards is something else entirely. It's the fear of being judged, wearing a costume that everyone applauds. This is the cruelest disguise a fear can wear. Most fears make you smaller in obvious ways. They make you hide, avoid, shrink. But this one makes you look better, while it slowly destroys you from the inside. It hides behind your achievements. It poses as your best quality. And that's exactly why it's so hard to see. So let's look at the 5 signs that your high standards might actually be fear in disguise. And as you listen, be honest with yourself, because some of these are going to land closer to home than you'd like. The first sign is that your standards only seem to apply when other people are watching. Think about it carefully. When you're doing something purely for yourself, with no audience, no one to impress, do you still demand perfection? Or does the pressure only spike when there's a chance someone might see, evaluate, or critique what you've done? Genuine high standards are internal. They come from your own values, and they stay consistent whether anyone is watching or not. But fear-based standards are reactive. They activate the moment judgment becomes possible. If you can leave your own personal projects half-finished and messy, but you'd rather die than let a colleague see a typo, your standards aren't really about quality. They're about controlling how others see you. The second sign is that finishing things feels almost impossible. Here's a paradox that traps so many people. The very thing they think makes them excellent is the thing that keeps them from ever completing anything. You start projects with enormous energy, but as you get closer to the end, something happens. The closer you get to done, the closer you get to being judged. Because a finished thing can be evaluated, a finished thing can be criticized. An unfinished thing is safe, because you can always tell yourself it's not ready yet. So you tweak endlessly. You refine details no one will ever notice. You tell yourself you're just being thorough. But underneath, you're terrified of the moment when the work leaves your hands and becomes vulnerable to other people's opinions. Perfectionism isn't a commitment to greatness. Often, it's a sophisticated form of avoidance. The third sign is that criticism doesn't just sting, it devastates you. When someone points out a flaw in your work, you don't experience it as useful feedback. You experience it as a verdict on your entire worth as a person. A single critical comment can ruin your whole day or week. You replay it obsessively. You feel exposed, humiliated, like you've been found out. And this reaction reveals the truth underneath the standards. If your high standards were really about the work, criticism of the work would be information, something to consider and possibly use. But if your standards are actually a shield against judgment, then any crack in that shield feels like a threat to your survival. The intensity of your reaction to criticism tells you exactly what those standards are really protecting. They're not protecting the quality of your work. They're protecting your fragile sense of being acceptable. The fourth sign is that you hold yourself to standards you'd never impose on anyone else. Watch how you talk to yourself versus how you talk to others. When a friend makes a mistake, you're understanding, generous, kind. You tell them it's okay, that everyone messes up, that they're being too hard on themselves. But when you make the exact same mistake, the internal voice turns vicious. There's no grace, no understanding, only contempt. This double standard is a dead giveaway. Real values are applied consistently. If you genuinely believed that high standards were about excellence, you'd want the people you love to reach them too. But you don't hold them to your impossible bar, because deep down, you know it's not about excellence. The brutal standard exists only for you, because only you carry the fear that without perfection, you'll be exposed as not good enough. The fifth sign is the most revealing of all. Even when you succeed, you feel no relief. You'd think that meeting your impossibly high standards would bring satisfaction, a moment of peace, a sense of arrival. But it never comes. You hit the goal, and within minutes the bar moves higher. The achievement that should have felt like enough feels like nothing. And then you're chasing the next thing, terrified of slowing down. This is the signature of fear-based standards, because the standards were never really about the achievement. They were about outrunning a feeling. The feeling that you're fundamentally inadequate, and that only by being flawless can you keep that truth hidden from the world. No achievement can ever fix a fear that lives in your sense of self. So you keep running, achieving, exhausting yourself, never understanding why the finish line keeps disappearing the moment you reach it. Now, here's where this gets important, because if you recognized yourself in these signs, you might be tempted to feel ashamed, which would just be another layer of the same fear. So let's talk about what's actually happening underneath and where it comes from. This pattern almost always begins early. Somewhere along the way, you learned that your worth was conditional, that love, approval, or safety depended on your performance. Maybe you were praised only for achievements and ignored otherwise. Maybe mistakes were met with harshness or withdrawal. Maybe you simply absorbed the message that being good wasn't enough, that you had to be the best to deserve a place in the room. So your young mind built a brilliant solution. If I can just be perfect, I'll never be rejected. And that strategy worked well enough to survive childhood. But you're not a child anymore, and the strategy that once protected you has become the thing that imprisons you. Because here's the truth that fear doesn't want you to know. The judgment you're so afraid of has far less power than you think. Most people are too busy worrying about their own perceived flaws to scrutinize yours. And the ones who do judge harshly are revealing their own insecurity, not your inadequacy. But more importantly, the safety you're chasing through perfection can never be reached that way. Because real security doesn't come from being beyond criticism. It comes from knowing that you'll be okay even when you're criticized. The goal was never to become so flawless that no one could ever judge you. The goal is to become someone who can be judged, who can fail, who can be imperfect, and still know, deep down, that your worth was never on the line in the first place. So what do? You start by separating the work from your worth. Your work can be good or bad, finished or flawed, and none of it determines whether you are acceptable as a human being. You practice doing things imperfectly on purpose. You finish the project and let it be seen, typos and all. You let someone criticize you and notice that you survive. You speak to yourself the way you'd speak to a friend. And slowly, repetition by repetition, you teach your nervous system the thing it never learned. That being imperfect is not dangerous. That being judged is not the end. That you are allowed to exist without being exceptional. Because the people who are truly free aren't the ones with the highest standards. They're the ones who no longer need to be perfect to feel okay. They can pursue excellence when it matters, and let things be good enough when it doesn't. They're not driven by terror. They're guided by values. And that, in the end, is the difference between standards that build a life and standards that build a prison. So ask yourself honestly, are your standards lifting you toward who you want to be? Or are they protecting you from a judgment that was never as dangerous as your fear made it seem? The answer might be the first step towards setting yourself free. If this hit close to home, subscribe. We explore the hidden psychology behind the things you thought you understood about yourself. Drop a comment and tell us which sign landed hardest. We read everyone,